I went on to do a few different system administration jobs, but then kind of like, I think it was 1992. I was watching, TV in the mornings, like early Good Morning America or something like that. And they were talking about the internet, and it kind of stunned me because, and when I was a teenager, kind of in my late teens, in the late 80s, people would ask me, hey, what are your hobbies? What do you do for fun? And I would say, I use the internet. And they would say, what? And I would have to explain what the internet was. And now suddenly they were talking about it on TV. Kind of when I was using it in the early 80s, I don't know how big the entire global internet community was, but if it was in the low single millions, I'd be stunned. It might have been in the hundreds of thousands only. I mean, it was just universities for the most part. And it was mostly in the US. And I just remember seeing that, and I was like, you know what? I've been doing all this stuff with Unix for a long time. I got coding down, I got the systems administration stuff down, but what I don't really understand is the network. And I really want to know how the network works. And so I started looking around for a job at an ISP, because that was the time when things were really starting to transition. They're moving from the NSFnet to a commercial-based network. Clinton had basically said, hey, we're going to back this thing up, and we're going to, really promote, the transition from the NSFnet, which was the backbone at the time, to a commercial backbone. Because when it was run by the NSFnet, the National Science Foundation, the problem was you couldn't do any commercial transactions. And what people really wanted to do is they wanted to be able to do e-commerce over the internet, and they couldn't if they sent anything over the NSFnet. They had to sign something where they agreed not to. So anyway, I found a job with a buddy of mine at an ISP called Internex. And I was the first network engineer there, and we had one point of presence in Menlo Park, and that was it. And then I think when I left, a year and a half later, we had ramped up from like 8 people when I started to like 80 in a year and a half. And we had gone to like 30 points of presence, and 2 or 3 of the 5 network access points at the time. Just super cowboy days. Everybody was exploding in growth. But I went from knowing nothing about networking to knowing a lot. And, I just applied myself.
What kind of volumes of data transfer were we looking at in those days?
It was low, right? I mean, people wanted to do more, but there was always a constant struggle. So like, for example, we were an ISP, not a co-location company, but we had some customers, like there was an early music streaming website called the Internet Underground Music Archive by this guy, John Luini, who is a friend of mine from Santa Cruz. And they would peg a T1, just completely destroy it, or even a T3. So they got to a point where they said, hey, can we just come put our servers in your data center space? And so we kind of backed into the co-location business because we had a small data center space in Santa Clara, and just more and more people started using up enough bandwidth that they were easily over the 1.5 megabits you would get off of T1, or even 45 megabits you get off of a T3, and they needed more and more. They needed 100 gig or more, which was tough in those days to engineer, but we started doing it.
Yeah, I mean, 100 gigs is pretty good today, so.
Yeah. 100 megs. Excuse me.
Oh, megs. Got it. Because I was like, gigs? Oh, that's pretty good.
Not bad.
Okay. Yeah, megs. That makes sense.
So
you didn't lose me there. Okay, got it.
So one of the best stories that I have from Internex that I don't get to tell very much is that I was involved in the Kevin Mitnick investigation, only peripherally, because Kevin Mitnick.
So sorry, I don't know who this is. So I might be the only guy in the world, but yeah.
Kevin Mitnick is one of the most notorious hackers. He was on the run for a period of time in 93, 94 when I was at Internex. And if you go look him up, Mitnick, M-I-T-N-I-C-K, he's one of the most notorious hackers ever. Anyway, Internex.
And that's funny because that was around the time when the movie Hackers came out, and then hackers, when you thought of hacker, you thought of bad person.
Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's when there was a whole challenge because those of us who have been using Hacker to sort of talk about programming got really kind of frustrated with the fact that
Negative.
Hacker now had this negative connotation to it. And I mean, it's never had a negative connotation to me, so it makes it hard for me to see it through other people's eyes that way. But anyway, so Kevin Mitnick had penetrated a few different systems, mostly because he was after this the email of this one reporter who had done some pieces on him, and that reporter actually was one of our customers. So he broke into our systems, and at one point I had to like go get a backup of all of our systems and put it on a DAT tape and basically hand it over to the FBI. Sorry, Kevin. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. Those were cowboy days, right? I mean, the internet was growing so fast, nobody knew what was going on. There was this transition off the NSFNet. E-commerce was brand new. You know, streaming music was brand new. You know, everybody was making shit up.
Was there even a browser?
Fun.
Was this
Yeah.
like, was this?
You could use Gopher and FTP and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
At this time, there were primitive browsers, including early Netscape, so Mosaic and things like that. So yeah, there were browsers. So one of our customers was this crazy website called The Spot, and thespot.com, and it was like this website that was like a takeoff on the MTV reality TV shows. Like it was like all these different people who were, you know, at this place called The Spot. It was a house. They all lived together. And it was a website that sort of had, you know, there wasn't enough bandwidth to really do video streaming or anything. So it was just like images and text, but they were like updating it all the time. So it had a storyline. And they had a T1 from us, and it was just pegged all the time, just completely pegged. And yeah, and so that was interesting.